Kirby Smart secures the bag, and it might be the last time we see it for a while.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Brian Gebhardt. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. The Atlanta Football Party is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Could a dog on the defensive side of the ball go number one overall? We'll tell you about that and dogs getting it done away from the football field. But first, let's talk about Kirby Smart securing the bag and what that means for the Dogs securing the dynasty. UGA announced Thursday that Kirby Smart received a new 10-year, $130 million deal. The deal makes Smart the highest paid college football coach in the country and its first $13 million coach. Kirby's new money is guaranteed for at least the first half of a contract that runs through the 23-33 season. Coach could also earn up to $1.55 million in bonuses. Now, Kirby's entering his ninth season as head football coach, and his Dogs have captured back-to-back national championships, of course, and also won an SEC record 29 straight games. So all of that said, Jarvis, what does this all mean for Kirby and the vision for the Dogs program?
In kind of a condescending way, it feels like he's not going to get a raise anytime soon, because when you think about, Jim Harbaugh and Nick Saban leaving the game, right, or moving on to, Nick Saban retiring and Jim Harbaugh going on to the NFL, like that's how those guys get those type of raises, right? Because you have these long-term contracts and like, oh, I need to be the highest paid college football coach in the country. And who's after Kirby? Because I feel like, is it Dabo? Like, would you throw him in there just because he's won a natty? So it's just, I feel like we're in a space where Kirby is the top dog, no pun intended, right? But there's such a big fall off. I feel like he's going to probably be the guy to be the highest paid college football coach in the country for quite some time, because I don't see anybody coming up in the ranks like that. That's going to push for that title.
And I think also not just about, that title, but I think it's about what this says in UGA's vote of support for him as a program. And I think also it talks about the sustainability and the continuity of the program with so much unrest in the college football ranks. And we know it's college sports in general, but specifically in the college football ranks. This is probably also a good look just from a recruiting perspective as well, and continuing to say, hey, we just want to remind the entire country, Brian, that we are the standard, and then there's the rest of the country and what they're trying to vie for to get there.
Yeah, it's the continued commitment to each other, right? Kirby staying there, and that the program and the state and everything in the university are committed with him. I think this is just going to happen every 2 years. Like you said, there'll be some other coach. I know Jarvis had mentioned, is it Dabo? And I think it was sort of Dabo that got his contract changed a little bit to get this contract changed a little bit. And it's just another step of him becoming, the next Nick Saban in that way. I wonder if Kirby is sitting back a little bit and just saying, like, hey, I wonder if someone else can catch me, like can get up to this level, because I'm going to want this raise in another year. I'm going to want this raise again in another 2 years or whatever it is. But yeah, I think it just shows the level of commitment that Kirby has to Georgia being here, as all these other coaches are leaving. Like, he seems like he's here for this new NIL era. He's ready for it and built for it for the moment. Who knows how long that'll last. And the other thing for me that I think about too is that, what would be too much for Kirby? I mean, we look at $13 million, that's great, and he's comfortable, but I don't know what number he could toss out there, or his agent could, where they're going to say no. I mean, hey, we want to raise. Okay. Like, what's the level where he gets a no from? And I don't know how high that number could get over the next couple of years.
And when you think about it,
I think so. Go ahead, Charles.
No, I'm just going to say that when you think about that aspect of it, right? Because given what today's world of college football, as far as NIL, and basically coaches have to be general managers of teams as well, that added title. You have some colleges implementing those positions as in today's world, and you really need them. But if you have a coach like Kirby Smart kind of mostly handle that on his own as far as roster management and retaining those guys and going out and recruiting to go get other guys as well, like, is really $13 million enough? Like, I had to think about it from that standpoint. I know it sounds crazy, like all these guys making all this money, but given now that we've opened up the Pandora's box as far as with the players getting paid, the more the coach has to deal with, shoot, that's the added job description, right? And we can even bring it down to our world. Whatever they add to that job description, all of us gonna be looking like, excuse me, that wasn't in my contract when we first signed on. I need some more bread. And why can't Kirby do the same?
Yeah. Why can't he and why will he not at some point, in all likelihood, do just that? And when you keep stacking like he does and you get an offensive depth chart like the one we're about to talk about, obviously he's worth that money. Now, speaking of that, this is still technically list season, but I feel like this might be the most random list of all. But okay, fine. We'll bite because, hey, we always do. We like to have a little fun with these silly lists. The post-spring practice offensive depth chart, BG.
Yes.
That's here now. That's what we're talking about on a May 7th. Now, this was an interesting article that we saw on usatoday.com, their UGA page, right? And it, of course, gave a lot of props to this offensive depth chart for Georgia. But what it basically did was kind of order the chart for every position based on first team, second string, and the like. So I will give you a couple of them, and kind of what I'm asking you guys to let me know your thoughts on is this. Do you feel like they actually got it right just in terms of like the pecking order, or do you see like, I don't know if that pecking order is right? There might be some position battles that may change the order, but let's go through a couple of them and kind of see where you guys land. Let's start with right tackle, BG. They put in Xavier Trusted, Jamal Merriweather / Bo Hughley behind him, and then at right guard, Tate Ratledge, followed by Kelton Smith, and then at center, Jared Wilson, followed by Drew Bobo. Let's stop right there. What do you think about that pecking order?
Yeah, I think that they nailed it. I think that right side of the offensive line is pretty set. Really nice that Tate Ratledge came back here too. I mean, that's really key for having a new center to be playing with in that interior of the offensive line. But I think they nailed it. I don't think there's too many question marks, to me at least, of who's going to be the starting offensive line. But the three that you just mentioned in the center, right guard and right tackle, I think they nailed that.
I think might be a little bit. I might question that right tackle spot, right? Because I understand Xavier Truss. He's a veteran. He was a guy that was filled in for you at the guard spot. Last year, when they were dealing with all those injuries, he's a versatile guy. He's also, I think that's his fifth. I think he's going into his fifth or sixth year. As far as being on this team. So when you think about it from that aspect of it, you got to think about a guy like Monroe Freeland. I feel like the more he pushes, the more I talked about going into the spring game. He's the type of guy that can be a guy that, hey, you can rotate in on this guy. This guy can start getting you some reps because we want to start preparing him for the future. We always know Kirby's always thinking ahead, right? Thinking of 1 or 2 years ahead about as far as from an experience standpoint. So I feel like Monroe Freeland will he'll be a guy that'll kind of plug in from that at that spot as far as Xavier Truss, whether it be an injury or if he's done enough in the spring and in the summertime going into camp to say, you know what, we got to figure out a way to get this guy on the field. And I think Xavier Truss will be that spot where they can kind of do a little spot duty there so he can get some good run at that right tackle spot.
All right, so let's go left side of the line, Jarvis. Left guard, Dylan Fairchild is in at that number one spot with Michael Morris. Second left tackle, first string would be Ernest Green. And speaking of Monroe Freeling, he's there at left tackle for second string. And then I'll expand it a little bit and we'll kind of go into, you know what, actually, let's stop there before we go into some of the skill position players. Let's stop there. Let's get your thoughts. And then BG, your thoughts on whether or not USA Today got it right on the left side of the line.
I think they got it right. They're spot on with the left side because when you think about what Ernest Green did, his redshirt freshman year, he was a freshman All-American last year. That's why I feel like he's going to be one of the next guys to be one of those high early round draft pick when he decides to go into the NFL. So I think that's totally solidified. And then Michael Morris and Dylan Fairchild, I didn't really like the whole rotating offensive lineman, but it worked. Michael Morris, Dylan Fairchild, I feel like Michael Morris is more of a role grader. That's kind of like the old school Georgia football style. It's kind of weird saying that, right?
Mhm.
And Dylan Fairchild is a guy who's a little bit more better in pass pro. So I like what they've been doing there. And if those guys are cool with it, as far as competing and getting those reps and rotating, I'm cool with it as well. So yeah, I think it's pretty solid on that side of the football.
Yeah, I've never been a big fan of the rotation of offensive linemen. It's just something that you've had to get used to watching Georgia football games. We're like, all right, we're gonna do this and get the reps and get it in and treat it like other positions, because it's just a weird way to wire your brain, having played line growing up and then to rotate in like that. But yeah, and Ernest Green, he is the next one. He is going to be when he comes out, he'll probably wind up being that top 5, top 10 pick, like somewhere where Andrew Thomas went, going back a handful of years. Like he's going to be of that ilk, I think, and might be the highest Georgia player off the board when he does decide to come out. So it's nice to talk about when you go through this depth chart on the offensive line, though. It gets me very excited because you're just thinking about, okay, they do go 6, 7, 8, 9 deep on this thing, where if they do have any injuries and the idea of rotating in, like they're going to be just fine if someone goes down.
Yeah. All right, BG, let's wrap up with, we're going to call it the pass catcher room, because I'm going to throw the running backs in there as well, because we know that they are good catching out of the backfield for the Dogs. From tight end, Oscar Delp, Ben Urisic, Lawson Lucky, Jaden Riddell, and then we go to the wide receiver depth. But these are actually the additional wide receivers that they kind of called out in this article. So it was more like, hey, we kind of know what the 1, 2, 3, 4 pecking order is. It's actually 6 through 10. They gave Anthony Evans, Michael Jackson III, London Humphreys, Cole Spear, and Nitro Tuggle / Sakovi White. And then as far as the running backs room goes, Trevor Etienne, Roderick Robinson, Branson Robinson, and Cash Jones.
Yeah. The thing it was interesting the way that you just said it, the way that they did it, like 6 through 10. And then here's the middle part is what sticks out to me. Well, one, just the depth piece, right? And the fact that even a transfer guy like London Humphreys, who can go a little bit, is listed 8th on this depth chart, is just like, wow, maybe they really do have this room. You look at 5 and 6, Arian Smith and Anthony Evans. Those are two guys, when we had talked a couple weeks ago about who might enter the portal, I really thought one or both of those guys may enter, especially what Anthony Evans showed last year. Because if you step into this team who still, as much as they're going to throw it around a little bit, they still are going to want to run the football. There's still going to be some old school Georgia elements to this. I wonder how many opportunities that Anthony Evans gets. And there was so much hype about Arian Smith, and then to see him still be 5th on this list is kind of like, okay. But I hope Anthony Evans gets enough reps this year to where we don't see him in the transfer portal going on to next season. Real quickly, as far as the tight ends go, I think they nailed it. The guy I really need to see a lot from is Lawson Lucky. Like, I want to see him take that. I trust in Delp being able to take that next step. Not that he's going to fully fill Brock Bowers' shoes. It's going to be a collective effort from everybody. And then I think Ben Urisic, I think he'll bring, that veteran presence and wind up being a steady option on this team as well.
And for me, I feel like only thing that really stands out to me is as far as the 1 through 5, as far as the wide receivers, right? Because I feel like those 6 to 10 guys, those guys are going to play themselves out. I would put Kobe Young behind Dylan Bell. I know Dylan Bell is going to be a more of a versatile guy, but I feel like Kobe Young can get definitely above Ra Thomas, and I think he can sneak into that 2 spot because of what he's going to be able to do. I feel he's going to be able to do in the red zone. He feel like he's got a nice little rapport with Carson Beck right now. So that's the only issue I really see as far from a pass catching standpoint. I feel like Kobe Young is going to be that wide receiver 2 for sure.
Okay. And like you mentioned, the list went with Dominic Lovett, obviously, in the first spot, Dylan Bell, then Thomas Young and Arian Smith to wrap around the top 5. And no shock, because we actually talked about the QB room last week. Obviously, Carson Beckton, Gunnar Stockton, Jaden Rashada, who's just coming into that room, and Ryan Puglisi. So always nice, the embarrassment of riches that the Dogs have. Could a dog on the defensive side of the ball go number 1 overall? Speaking of an embarrassment of riches on the other side of the ball, we'll talk about that when we go between the hedges. This episode of the Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So let's just keep this thing real. We're talking dogs here, right? So there might be a player prop out there for Anthony Edwards that you might want to jump on in case you missed all the action from last night, game 2. Wolves Nuggets. He actually showed up and showed out again. We're going to talk about that later in the show, by the way, but that might be a good look bet for you right about now. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count for Anthony Edwards, the Minnesota Timberwolves, or even any team across the entirety of the NHL postseason. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Locked On Sports Today is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel that's programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that background noise. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So guys, there's another list out there. But this one this time is going in an interesting direction, I think, because it's the top 25 NFL draft prospects for 2025, which actually includes, for once, a strong class of defenders. But I think what really kind of caught us, at least part one of what caught us off guard, because I think there were kind of two things that caught us off guard on this list. And that's the fact that, oh my God, is there actually a defensive player at the top of the list? And not just any defensive player, Brian, but Mykel Williams, the edge out of Georgia, who is also known as Jarvis's BFF. So that said, are you saying that Jarvis's BFF is that dog? Mykel Williams is him? Oh my.
Yep. There's our Mykel Williams, our Mykel Minute, but it's a whole segment now. He gets it. I mean, at least we're not the only one there being like Mykel Williams, Mykel Williams, Mykel Williams. Yeah, this list from Nate Tice of Yahoo, who just moved over from the Athletic. He does a great job with this. And this stuck out the other day. I saw this. I was like, whoa. And I always like looking at the prospect lists versus the mock drafts just to be like, all right, who's the best football player out here? And the fact that he has Mykel is wild, right? Because we've seen all the flashes and we've seen different parts, but the production, like the numbers and the stats haven't been there and need to be there for him to be able to get to that one spot. But like we saw a couple years ago, Travon Walker climbed up and all of a sudden was the number 1 pick, which really shocked everybody because even the majority of the year, he was not like the main or the biggest star on that defensive line for Georgia at that period of time. So the fact that other people are viewing Mykel Williams in this way, I think is really good. And when he's on lists like that, now he's going to be that name brought up, right? Everybody knows we're going to show Carson Beck. We're going to show Malachi Starks. Okay, who's the third player you show for Georgia, right? And now it's going to be Mykel Williams, I believe. And I think he'll be featured in all these like pregame things and all that sort of thing. And yeah, I think there's a world that certainly exists. I mean, if he brings double-digit sack production and he's in these playoff games and these high-profile games, there is a world, I think, certainly that he can wind up, kind of going number 1.
Yeah, and just remember, Nate Tice and everyone else out there, the Mykel Minute that has turned into the Mykel Williams segment started right here on the Atlanta Football Party. We told you before everyone, okay? Jarvis read the tea leaves, Brian co-signed on the tea leaves,
That's
and
right.
then I seconded, thirded, and fourth the motion.
To the Williams family, we've been with you from the beginning. Okay?
Exactly. We're your fam. Yeah, you just remember that come 2025, that here's where it all started. But I think, Jarvis, in all honesty, Brian makes a great point because you are talking about a guy in Williams who, at least so far, has averaged less than 1 solo tackle per game, 26 solo tackles, 28 games, just 4.5 sacks in 2023. So even Nate Tice, the writer of this article, said, how is he so high on this big board? But I think Brian already answered part of that. And I know you have some thoughts and answers on why he could be that high on a board too.
Yeah, when you look at the athlete, just the measurements, the measurables, right? Those pop out, 6'5", 265. Oh my God, that is the prototypical edge in, today's NFL. So when you think about it from that standpoint, also versatility, He can line up outside. You've seen him stand up a little bit. He can also bump down inside on third and long as well, and give you a little take advantage of a guard that might not be able to handle that length and strength, right? Coming off the ball like that. So, but it's like Brian said, the numbers don't add up, right? So when you go back to 2022, I know you remember. I was pounding the table for this is an abomination. This should not happen. Trent Baalke is smoking some good drugs. There's no way that Travon Walker should be the number 1 overall pick. And guess what happened? He took him number 1 overall pick. Why? Because the measurables, the combine workout. And I think that Mykel Williams, if you put him in a combine workout right now, I probably say that he would be that number 1 guy or a top 5 guy, a top 7 guy in the NFL draft. So when you think about it from that standpoint, I see it. It can happen. It can definitely happen. But I just want to see it put on tape, because that's what I'm big on. Because a lot of times, like certain things, I always say that certain things transfer to the NFL. If you have a certain type of repertoire, right? If you bring and especially on the college level, and you bring that to that, you can take that with you. Deion always talking about bringing your Louis bag. Like you can bring your Louis bags on third and long. If Mykel Williams got that certain type of repertoire, that carries over to the NFL very easily. So I think overall, when you just look at guys being drafted number 1 overall, go back to 2014 when Jadeveon Clowney was drafted number 1 overall. What was that big thing, big moment, right? Like you said, BG, when he knocked the crap out of that doggone Michigan running back. They played that highlight over and over and over again. And I never remember when John Gruden was on the doggone call for that game. He said, you know what? Yeah, I'll take him. It seemed back in the day, how John Gruden used to put his stamp on folks, they used to go, right? And so when you think about it from that aspect of it, like all it takes is a big moment in a big game, or whether it be the SEC championship. So I feel like if he's able to, have a super combine workout, put up some decent numbers for my piece, right? I want to see him do well, and then you get into that big moments in the big time games. He can easily go. And you also probably got to have a crazy general manager sitting there with the number 1 overall pick too.
Yeah, a little bit, right? To your point, Jarvis, I mean, think about how many opportunities he's going to have. We've talked about the schedule a good bit in this offseason, right?
Yes.
You're out of
Alabama,
the gate and Bama, Texas, and then they're going to be in the playoffs, right? So it's a matter of how deep they go. This is going to be 6, 7, 8 different games. You're talking about half the season is going to be some sort of marquee matchup where you've got all the eyeballs on Georgia versus whoever they might be playing that week. So, and granted, who knows? Maybe this moment comes in Tennessee Tech where he has some crazy strip sack or something, but he's going to have all these opportunities.
4 sacks or something like that. Multiple sack game. Yeah.
But he's going to have all these opportunities 6, 7, 8 different times to be like in the marquee game of the week as the, potentially number 1 team and all of that. So he's going to have all those opportunities for all those moments to say that, and the clip they show over and over again. This is why he's the number 1 pick,
Okay, Mikey, time to shine. When we come back, we'll tell you about dogs getting it done away from the football field. And next up, this episode of our Atlanta Football Party is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go, even though I know we kind of already talked about it a little bit, but there's a lot of good stuff in this game, so much so that I went to brunch Sunday. You guys know I love to brunch. And as I'm talking through what we're going to order, I look to my left and I see that my friend is playing Monopoly Go. And I'm like, who are you playing Monopoly Go with at brunch? Turns out her family has 3 different groups of about 15 people that play against one another. That is how popular and how exciting this Monopoly Go game is. And you can do it too. You can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win, the more awesome prizes you unlock, unique stickers you can trade, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. So Monopoly Go also is exciting every day because they change tournaments, they change challenges, they have mini games, you can dig for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. So there's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, including massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzy. So get off the bench and go download it now. It's free on Google Play or the App Store. That's Monopoly Go. Game on. Okay, why stop on the football field with excellence, right? Jarvis, the Dogs are doing it anywhere they darn well please these days, including on the baseball field. The presumed top 2 pick, who actually is kind of even potentially battling for that number 1 spot in the upcoming MLB draft, Charlie Condon. He's leading all of D1 college baseball in home runs and batting average so far this season. Let me drop a few stats on you that we played around with earlier this morning, because we've been talking about Charlie for a couple days now, and the stats keep changing. That's how good he is. Every single day, he's doing one more thing to up his game. 33 home runs in 47 games, hit one Sunday, extended his streak to 7 straight games with a round trip. He's actually closing in, Jarvis, on an NCAA record. He's now tied the all-time mark for home runs in a single season in what they're calling the BB Core era, which is basically this baseball stat that was conjured up by the NCAA. But basically, it certifies the performance of bats used in competition. All that said, Charlie Condon is absolutely killing it. He's a big part of the reason that the Dogs are 35-12 in action, a big part of the reason that they actually ruled Vanderbilt not once, but twice this weekend. Charlie Condon's a bad, bad man.
Absolutely. And if I can go back to a football reference, right? The measurables, dude, 6'6", 215. What is going on out here?
Yeah.
Why are you so big playing baseball? You know, of course,
bring him to the combine, you know?
Right,
Hello.
exactly. Like 6'6", 215. What? And he has a cannon of an arm, right? He has that tool in his toolbox. I'm surprised his high school coach didn't say, "Hey man, you want to come up throw this football for a second? You can be, you can get this money a little bit earlier, sir. 21 years old, you can be a number 1 overall pick." So ask Carson Beck. So yeah, but all seriousness though, this is real cool, like, because baseball was my first sport, and I just love the game, so much. Just playing it. I wasn't that great at it, but obviously, I got recruited from baseball. Say, hey man, you need to be on the football field somewhere. So yeah,
Right.
I believed them, and it worked out. It worked out well. But yeah, so I think Charlie Condon it'd be really cool to see this guy to be a number 1 overall pick, and just like the other guy we're about to talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, it's such a fun story. And the thing that's crazy about him, you mentioned 6'6", 215. He's got all these, he's got the Georgia single season record and the career record, breaking both of Gordon Beckham's ones. He's headed towards an NCAA record. He wasn't even a big recruit necessarily coming out. Like, that's the thing that's wild about this. This is a guy that just kind of took off and now has the chance to be number 1. And I got to tell I got my nephew's 14. He's right in the middle of all the travel baseball stuff. Georgia's as good a baseball, recruiting kind of up and coming. The talent in Georgia is as good as anybody. If they see this guy go there, be the number 1 pick, that's only going to beef up the Georgia program. And I know you alluded to it a second ago. We'll talk about another number 1 pick out of Athens a couple of years ago, and Anthony Edwards. Think about this with Charlie Condon, Anthony Edwards. And so Charlie Condon goes 1, and you had Anthony Edwards go 1 a couple of years ago, and you had Travon Walker. So now you have 3 different sports, number 1 overall picks, all from the same school. It doesn't really get better than that in terms of being like, come to Athens, good things will happen, just to make sure you get rides at night. Okay.
And for those of you listening to this podcast, Brian is a UGA alum as well, so you see how he promoting it, right? It's coming from a certain space.
It's going on up there,
y'all. I'm telling y'all.
You're driving from Atlanta. Hit me up offline. I'll sell it more if you guys need me to. So
right, and it's so perfect though, because it literally says that you don't have to go far from home if you want to show your talents, if you want your family and friends to be able to see what it is that you're able to do in the sport that you love and the sport that you're good at. I think it's excellent. And it actually goes back to, it's sneaky good, by the way, for what we talked about in that first segment about how it's good to have a Kirby Smart, because Kirby and those players go to basketball games. They go to baseball games. It's really like a family affair. So low key, we may be joking about it, but real talk, that is a good selling point on so many levels for him coming back and what he's able to do to support those other teams. But then for them to be able to show and prove and say, look here on display, whether Condon goes 1 or 2, that's still big money. That's still big guaranteed baseball money. And we know Anthony Edwards and what he's been able to do. I mean, it's just crazy. We talked about this a couple months ago, actually on another one of my shows. And the question was next faces of the NBA, right? And Jarvis, Brian, when did you really think we were going to have a conversation about the second round of the NBA playoffs in 2024? And you can say, oh, yeah, we're not going to be talking about Steph Curry or Kevin Durant or LeBron James, et cetera, et cetera. Nope. The conversation is going to be squarely on a guy who played basketball at the University of Georgia, who is setting the pace. Now, last night, of course, he was tied with Karl Anthony Towns for just 27 points. I say just because the dude scored 43 in the first game, and yet it was still such an amazingly balanced attack. It was 27 points on 11 of 17 shooting, 7 assists, 2 steals, so efficient, so effective, Jarvis. I mean, you cannot say enough about the fact that a Georgia Bulldog is turning the page as one of the new faces of the NBA.
I'll tell you what, T, I'm not surprised. The man is from Atlanta. Think about the personalities that have come out of this city.
I know.
You know, you got me, you got Cam Newton.
Okay.
I like how you started with you.
Ain't lie.
That's next week's list to break down.
Exactly.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I got me,
Cam, Edwards, that's everybody else.
Exactly.
Anthony, Ant-Man. No.
Top personalities out of the A.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, go ahead and start that list, y'all. Please send those, put those messages right there in the box. Top 8 Atlanta personalities. Yeah, I'm sure I'll be at the top of the list. But all seriousness though, the dude just has it. Anthony Edwards has it, and you can't train for that. It's just you're born with it, and he has it. Like I was just looking at the post-game presser last night, and when you think about how he just handles situations, one of the reporters was trying to ask Cat Williams about, you know, him being a stat stuffer and all that stuff, and you can just easily see him just subtly tap Cat on his leg. Said, "No, I got this one, bro." He's like, "No, he's not a stat stuffer." It's just all it took was our coach coming in and saying, "Hey, man, if we want to go anywhere, you guys have to play defense." And I think that's just the leadership, the personality, and all that just kind of bundles up into, you know what? This dude is the face of the league, because I'll never forget. I can't take credit for it. We were watching the Phoenix Suns in the first round. And you know, Tenitra, my wife, you know how she is when she comes to certain comments. Like she'll just drop a comment out of nowhere. She was like, "Why don't Kevin Durant just retire? He looks tired." You know, and I'm just like, you know what? That is a good point. He looks tired. And then the Lakers get bounced out. It's a new era. And I think that the door is wide open. I think Ant-Man is kicking that bad boy down.
Yeah, I love it too, because not only Anthony Edwards, and obviously we're talking UGA here, but yeah, come back on Thursday and we're going to talk about how this looks for the entirety of Georgia, because Jaylen Brown is about to smoke somebody tonight and for the rest of these nights. But yeah, it's really good too, because we've had an opportunity to see what Jaylen's been able to do across several years now, Brian, but to be able to see Anthony Edwards, it feels like, although we here know better, but it feels like overnight he just decided, you know what, I'm not going to just take my game next level. I'm going to go next with it.
Yeah, it's not surprising that he's here. It's, to me, right. I honestly thought it was going to be one more year, right? Maybe they'd have to get to the second round.
Sure.
They're 6-0, and they're 6-0 against Durant and Booker and the reigning, you know, Jokic, who's the best player in the league until Ant-Man might take this title from him. They ran them out of the gym, the defending world champions. They gave them the worst playoff loss. It was like the biggest lead against them in Nuggets history. And that was without the defensive player of the year in the league who had, you know, his wife had their first baby. And they're just like, they're up 20 in the fourth and beating them at home. It's crazy. And they're just on a mission right now. And he's bringing Cat along with them. It's extremely impressive. And yeah, I mean, if they keep winning games and they win this title, he is the new face of the league. So
I would agree.
You know, the future is here with Ant for sure.
Yeah, and I think there's something you just hit on in case they do actually get to the Western Conference Finals. And I think if they get to the Western Conference Finals on this kind of a tear, there's every possibility they'll get to the NBA Finals. It'll be interesting to see because of the mental that we're seeing from Anthony Edwards versus what we see with these Boston Celtics. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. Got to agree with you guys. A couple years ago, I went to Cleveland for All-Star for 2 reasons: to interview Trae Young and to interview Anthony Edwards. And nothing against Trae Young, but I actually had an opportunity to interview him before because I worked for the Hawks. But That Anthony Edwards interview, 10 seconds in, he gets out this flip phone and he's like, okay, we ready to interview? And it's like this whole like gag thing he's doing with his teammate. And you could just see like people just gravitate towards him, right? They just gravitate to him as a personality, but then he backs it up with his play. He's a very intelligent, very caring guy and has the right people around him on and off the court to be able to do some of the amazing things he's doing. So yeah, we're here for it. We're always here for it. Anytime we can see the local product go good. Thanks for stopping by the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, we're free and available wherever you download your podcasts. We'll see you on the Atlanta Sports Party Thursday.